Show. Joining us now is former Congressman Pete Hoekstra from, he used to represent the 2nd District of Michigan. And right now he's a Shillman Senior Fellow with the Investigative Project on Terrorism, and he is the former chairman of the U.S. House Intelligence Committee. So it's kind of a big wheel. And Mr. Chairman, good to have you with us.
Hey, thank you. Good morning.
I was fired up to have you on when I read your piece the other day in the Daily Caller. I want you to tell our audience, Mr. Chairman, because this is one of these things that it kind of gets beyond people because they don't know what the acronyms mean, and so they're onto something else. But there are claims that CENTCOM manipulated the facts and information on what they were getting back with the gains that ISIS were making in order to fit it into the Obama narrative. What do you know about this, and how real is it?
Well, what we know is that it appears that there are a number of what we would call, collectors of data, people who are maybe on the ground in the Middle East. They're collecting intelligence on a 24/7 basis. They prepare their reports. They send it up. They send it up through the chain of command, and then at some point they hear their leadership talking about the situation in Iraq, or Syria, and they believe it should be based on the intelligence that they're providing. And it appears that a number of people in the intelligence community are listening to the leadership talking about what we know about ISIS, and they're saying, wait a minute, that's not the data, that's not the raw data that we're collecting, that's not the information that we're sending up through the command chain. How does this stuff change? And so they thought it was serious enough that that they've reached out. They've reached out into Congress, and they've said, hey, we think someone may be cooking the books and altering the intelligence significantly. Why would they do this? They're doing this because they're, frustrated because, everything runs downhill when the leadership is out there and saying, hey, ISIS is contained. People believe that's based on the intelligence that we're collecting in the region, and these folks are saying, we never said that. And we just want to set the record straight here that there appears to be a real difference between the intelligence that's being collected and the narrative that's being reported.
Why? Why is this happening? I mean, there has to be a motivation behind this. We'll get to the whistleblowers, and I'll protect them in a minute, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
But what's the motivation? I mean, you're in CENTCOM. You gather the facts. That's what your job is, right? You gather the facts, and then you present them to the Congressional Committee. Now, as you said, fabricating or manipulating these findings, I mean, this is a very serious charge. So what would be the motivation in order to manipulate the narrative?
Well, the motivation would be to paint, in this case, it would appear to be, if these facts are accurate, it would be to paint a much more rosier picture of of what's going on in Iraq and Syria, and than what is really happening. So, if things aren't quite as bad as what if you're reporting that they're not quite as bad as what they really are, it means that maybe things are moving fine. Maybe it means, hey, the strategy that is being employed in Iraq and Syria is working, and we don't need to alter it and modify it. And what we've seen here is that the president and others in his administration have made some phenomenal statements about what's going on in the Middle East that have proven to be dramatically wrong. That ISIS was a JV team, that we had them contained. I think you just had the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff yesterday, contradicting the president and saying, no, ISIS is not contained. Well, it was not that long ago that the president said ISIS was contained. I think it's just a matter of weeks. So, it's somewhere someone may be thinking we've got to alter this information or this analysis so that when we're talking with people higher up in the executive branch, we're actually providing them with the narrative that they want to hear.
When you say, Mr. Chairman, a narrative that they want to hear, this is in private. So once they tell the president and his staff that's involved in this what's actually happening, then they can go to their political wing and spin it however they please. But when this information gets to Congress, I mean, isn't this a serious violation of just the American trust here?
I was going to say the appropriate word would be trust. This is breaking the trust between the executive agencies, in this case the intelligence community, and the folks that they report to in Congress, specifically the intelligence committees. And I think that's why you had these individuals coming forward. They don't feel comfortable about this, and they're professionals. Mm-hmm. And so they're kind of like, hey, our professional reputation is on the line, but more importantly, America's national security is on the line, and we want to make sure that Congress understands that, we know what we're doing. Now, the narrative may be changing as it goes up through the command chain, but it's not because it's garbage in. We're providing good, accurate intelligence. Somewhere in this process, it's being manipulated and changed according to the allegations.
A whistleblower in CENTCOM. I mean, this is not an easy thing to do, to get up one day and say, I'm going to rat all these people out because now you got the federal government and all that power. We've seen in the past how the government has retaliated. What sorts of protections do whistleblowers have here?
Well, what you have is, it's very interesting, and I think it's a huge problem because in all the time I was in Congress, I found whistleblowers to be extremely valuable, whether it was in the education department, the labor department, or in the intelligence community. In most of the government, whistleblowers have protections if they go directly to Congress. However, in most of the intelligence community, so CIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, and these organizations, whistleblowers don't have protections if they come directly to Congress. The procedures are very straightforward. If you're a whistleblower, you're told you have to first go to your supervisor. If your supervisor then approves, you can go talk to the Inspector General of your agency, and as a last resort, you can go to Congress. But this makes it very difficult. And, what are whistleblowers for? Whistleblowers are to expose potential wrongdoing as they see it within their organization. But I also think that whistleblowers are there. I know that Trey Gowdy and the Benghazi Committee has had tremendous difficulty getting information out of the intelligence community as they're trying to complete their investigation. I think whistleblowers also need these kinds of protections so that when an agency maybe is withholding information from Congress, that whistleblowers be empowered to provide that information to Congress. And remember, they would only be dealing with the intelligence committees in either the House or the Senate. So it's not like they're sharing classified information or other documentation with people who shouldn't have access to it. They're providing the information to people who have a right to see it. So what we need to do is we need to strengthen and enhance whistleblower protections in the intelligence community to match what we have in the rest of government. It's absolutely essential to make sure that people, when they see wrongdoing or they see an agency withholding information from Congress, that they have an avenue and a mechanism to expose that kind of behavior.
So, Mr. Chairman, who's carrying the water for this right now in the House?
Well, there's really no legislation for strengthening whistleblower protections at this point in time. One of the things that I do hope happens is that the Benghazi Committee kind of sets a precedent and very publicly and firmly states that any whistleblowers who are coming to them out of the intelligence community will have the full protections of their committee so that these whistleblowers so that hopefully some whistleblowers will come forward and give this committee the kind of information. So I think Trey Gowdy and that committee really has the opportunity to kind of set a precedent in terms of changing the culture with the intelligence community and encouraging whistleblowers to come forward.
I want to get to ISIS, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, you were there for a long time. You had a lot of knowledge as House Intel Committee what was going on. Now Obama's committing another number of special ops forces to Iraq. We have no authorization of military force at all. No one really knows what the objective is. No one has any idea what Obama's strategy is. We've got 2 minutes. Help us understand what the plan is here.
Well, I don't think there is a plan. I mean, we're losing ground. We're losing this war. ISIS is establishing bases in Libya, northern Africa. They're establishing the caliphate in Syria and Iraq. The Joint Chiefs of Staff yesterday said, they're not contained. So bluntly speaking, we're losing this war. There may have been a strategy, but it's not working. We haven't empowered people like the Kurds and the Sunni tribes who could move ISIS out of Iraq, but that's not a strategy that the president wants to embrace. The president has aligned himself with a government in Baghdad, the Shia government that is backed by Tehran. That is a failing strategy if we are going to confront and contain and ultimately defeat ISIS. Sending 200 troops in. I mean, think about it. Can you believe it? The press reports this morning are saying we're finally going to give our special operations troops the authorization to target and to kill ISIS leaders. And it's like, you mean we've been putting our special operations forces on the ground without the authorization to protect themselves and to kill and attack the enemy? Now, I think this has been one of this is really a sorry state of affairs, what's happened and how ISIS has grown. And remember, they right now control an area roughly the size of the state of Indiana. They're producing oil. They're selling oil. They're administrating a geographic territory. It's absolutely outrageous that we've allowed this caliphate to establish itself in this great of an extent.
No answer here but to take their landmass away, which then takes their income away.
Absolutely.
I was in Nevada the other day. We're out of time, and I was reading the New York. I think the Washington Post or something had a big story on how they were generating tax dollars and everything else. I mean, it's outrageous. We're out of time. I want to thank
thank you.
former chairman of the House Intel Committee, Pete Hoekstra, for being with us.